You know what they say about family being everything? I used to believe that too, until the day I came home from a peaceful 2-week vacation in Colorado and found complete strangers living in my beachfront villa, the home I'd owned for 23 years. My daughter Victoria had sold it, and when I called her desperate for answers, she actually laughed at me. "You're basically homeless now, Mom," she said. Then she hung up. But here's what Victoria didn't know, what she couldn't have known. I'm glad to have you here. Follow my story until the end and comment the city you're... I was sitting on the balcony of a cozy cabin rental in the Colorado mountains, wrapped in my favorite wool blanket, watching the sun dip behind the peaks. The air was cool and crisp, carrying the scent of pine trees. For the first time in months, I felt like I could actually breathe. My name is Emma Richardson. I'm 72 years old, and I'd spent the better part of my life working myself to the bone. Started as a secretary in a law firm back in the 70s, right out of high school. No college degree, my family couldn't afford it. But I was smart, determined, and I paid attention. I worked my way up. Secretary to office manager to paralegal. Every promotion was hard-won. Every dollar I earned went toward building a life I could be proud of. By the time I retired at 65, I'd saved enough to buy my beachfront villa outright in Florida. No mortgage, no debt. It was mine. Purchased in 2002 for $370,000. Now worth close to $850,000 according to the latest appraisal. 23 years I'd lived in that villa. 23 years of memories soaked into every corner. I could tell you about the way the morning light would stream through the floor-to-ceiling windows in the living room, making the whole space glow like honey. The little reading nook I'd set up by the fireplace where I'd spend my evenings with a cup of chamomile tea and whatever mystery novel caught my fancy. The guest bedroom where my daughter Victoria used to stay when she'd visit back when she actually visited. That villa wasn't just a home. It was proof that I'd made it. Proof that a woman who started with nothing could build something solid and lasting. But lately I'd been feeling tired. Not just physically tired, though my knees weren't what they used to be. Mentally exhausted. Victoria had been calling more frequently over the past year, always with some new crisis. Her husband Brandon's consulting business wasn't doing well. They were stressed about money. The kids needed this or that. Could I help them out? Just a lone mom, just until they got back on their feet. I'd helped before, a few thousand here and there over the years, but it never seemed to be enough. There was always another emergency, another unexpected expense. And Victoria? She'd changed. Or maybe I'd just finally started seeing her clearly. She wasn't the little girl who used to bring me dandelions from the yard anymore. She wasn't the teenager who'd cry on my shoulder about boy troubles. She was a grown woman in her early 40s with her own family, her own problems. And increasingly, she seemed to view me as a solution to those problems, rather than as her mother. That's why I'd booked the Colorado trip. I needed distance. I needed to clear my head and figure out how to set boundaries with my own daughter without destroying what was left of our relationship. The vacation was supposed to be 2 weeks. 2 weeks to hike through the mountains, visit small towns, maybe do some antiquing. 2 weeks to remember who I was before I became Mom, or the woman with the nice beachfront villa. I remember sitting in that cabin journaling about my life, writing about my late husband Tom, who'd passed 15 years ago from a sudden heart attack. Writing about the career I'd built through sheer determination. Writing about Victoria and how proud I'd been when she graduated from college with honors, when she landed her first marketing job, when she married Brandon. I wrote about my grandchildren, too. Sophia, 13, so bright and observant. Lucas, 10, still full of that innocent joy that only children possess. I wrote about my hopes for the future. Maybe I'd travel more. Maybe volunteer at the local library. Maybe finally take that watercolor painting class I'd been thinking about for years. I felt peaceful there. Hopeful, even. I had no idea that while I was writing about new beginnings, my daughter was erasing everything I'd built. I had no idea that the power of attorney I'd signed 2 years earlier, just a precaution when I had my gallbladder surgery, something my lawyer had strongly recommended, was being weaponized against me at that very moment. I spent my last day in Colorado at a local farmer's market in a tiny town called Evergreen. The morning was bright and clear, the kind of perfect mountain morning that makes you grateful to be alive. I bought small gifts for my grandchildren at a handmade crafts booth. A carved wooden bear for Lucas. He'd been fascinated by wildlife ever since we'd watched a nature documentary together last summer. A delicate beaded bracelet for Sophia turquoise and silver, the kind of thing a young girl starts to appreciate when she's becoming a young woman. The vendor, an elderly man with kind eyes and weathered hands, wrapped each gift carefully in tissue paper. "Your grandkids are lucky to have you," he said with a smile. "I'm the lucky one," I'd replied, meaning it. I remember thinking about how excited they'd be to see Grandma Emma, how I'd tell them stories about the mountains, about the deer I'd seen on my morning walks, about the stars at night, so many more than you could ever see in Florida with all its light pollution. Maybe next summer I'd thought I could bring them back here with me, show them the beauty I'd discovered, teach them about the peace you could find in nature. The drive home was long but pleasant. I took my time stopping at roadside diners, listening to audiobooks, cozy mysteries, my favorite genre. There was something comforting about stories where justice always prevailed in the end, where the bad guys always got caught, where everything tied up neatly. I wasn't in any rush to get home. Why would I be? I was heading back to my villa, my safe place, my reward for a lifetime of hard work. I pulled into my building's parking garage late in the afternoon 3 days ago. The familiar beep of the security gate opening, the smooth descent down the ramp to the resident parking level. Everything was exactly as it should be. I parked in my assigned spot, number 47, right next to the elevator. I'd had that spot for years, ever since I'd moved in. Close to the elevator was important when you were my age and often carrying groceries. I rolled my suitcase toward the elevator, already planning my evening. Maybe a long bath with lavender salts. Order some Thai food from that place down the street that made the best pad see ew. Call Victoria and tell her about the trip, see how the kids were doing. The elevator hummed softly as it carried me up to the 15th floor. That same gentle hum I'd heard thousands of times before, comforting in its familiarity. The doors opened. The hallway looked exactly the same. Same beige carpet, same soft lighting, same potted plants that Mrs. Patterson from 15C religiously watered every Tuesday. She was there now, actually, her watering can in hand. "Emma, welcome back, dear," she called out, her face lighting up. "How was Colorado?" "Wonderful, Helen," I said, smiling. "I'll tell you all about it over coffee this week." "I'd love that," she said warmly. Everything was normal. Everything was fine. I reached my door, 15G, the corner unit with the best views in the entire building, and reached into my purse for my keys. The weight of them was familiar in my hand. The keychain was a small silver starfish that Victoria had given me years ago, back when she still thought about things like that. I slid the key into the lock. It wouldn't turn. I frowned, jiggling it slightly. Sometimes the lock stuck a bit after I'd been gone for a while. The salt air from the beach could make things a little stiff. But this wasn't stiff. This was wrong. The key wouldn't even go in all the way. That's when I noticed it. The lock itself looked different. Newer. Shinier. My stomach did a small flip, but I pushed the feeling down. Building maintenance must have replaced the locks. They'd done that once before years ago, after a break-in on the 3rd floor. They must have forgotten to give me the new key. I pressed the doorbell. Once, twice, 3 times. Through the frosted glass panel beside the door, I could see movement inside. Someone was home. Good. They'd let me in and I could figure this out. The door opened about 6 inches. A chain lock held it in place. A man I'd never seen before stared out at me through the gap. He was maybe 40 years old, with a thick dark beard and suspicious eyes. Yes, his tone wasn't friendly. It was the tone of someone confronting a stranger at their door. But this was my door, my home. "Oh, hello," I said, trying to keep my voice pleasant despite the confusion swirling in my head. "I'm sorry to bother you, but I think there's been some kind of mix-up with the locks. I live here. This is my villa." The man's eyebrows drew together. "What? I'm Emma Richardson. I live here. I've lived here for over 20 years. I held up my key ring, showing him my keys. "See, I have keys. I just got back from vacation and—" "Lady, I don't know what you're talking about," he interrupted. I felt my chest tighten. "But this is 15G. This is my home." He glanced back over his shoulder. A woman appeared behind him, his wife, I assumed. She was younger, maybe mid-30s, with blonde hair pulled back in a ponytail. She looked concerned. "Honey, what's going on?" she asked. "There's someone at the door saying she lives here," he said. The woman stepped forward, her face a mixture of concern and irritation. "I'm sorry, but what—" "This is my home," I repeated, hearing my voice shake now. "I've been on vacation. There must be some mistake. Did maintenance let you in? Are you doing repairs? The man shook his head slowly. We're not doing repairs, ma'am. We own this place. We bought it 3 weeks ago. Closed on it, moved in everything. The world seemed to tilt sideways. That's impossible, I whispered. You can't have bought it. It's not for sale. It's mine. The woman crossed her arms. Her expression had shifted from concerned to defensive. Look, I don't know what's happening here, but we have the deed. We went through a real estate agent, signed all the papers, did the whole closing process. We paid $840,000 for this property. This is our home now. $840,000. My villa. Sold. Who? My voice came out hoarse. I cleared my throat and tried again. Who sold it to you? The man and woman exchanged glances. There was something in that look, a flicker of uncertainty, maybe even pity. Your daughter, the man said finally. Victoria Richardson Parker. She's the one who handled the whole sale. She had all the paperwork, power of attorney, everything legal. She said you were moving into a care facility and wanted to liquidate your assets. My legs went weak. I reached out and gripped the door frame to steady myself. A care facility. Liquidate my assets. My daughter. Ma'am, are you okay? The woman asked, her voice softening slightly. You look very pale. Do you need to sit down? I shook my head, taking a step back. I need to make a phone call. The man's expression was sympathetic now. Look, I'm really sorry about whatever's going on here, but we bought this place fair and square. We have 2 kids starting at the school district next month. We sold our old house to afford this one. Whatever's happening between you and your daughter, you need to work it out with her, not us. The door closed. I heard the deadbolt slide into place, that solid final sound of a lock engaging. I stood there in the hallway staring at the door that had been mine for 23 years. The door I'd painted a custom shade of navy blue because it reminded me of the ocean. The door that had a tiny scratch near the bottom where I'd once dropped my keys. Except now it wasn't navy blue anymore. It was gray. A plain, unremarkable gray. They'd even repainted my door. My hands were trembling as I pulled out my phone. I scrolled through my contacts until I found Victoria's number. My thumb hovered over it for just a moment. Part of me didn't want to call. Part of me wanted to believe this was all some horrible misunderstanding that could be explained away. Maybe Victoria had rented the place out while I was gone as some kind of surprise to make extra money for me. Maybe she'd thought I was staying in Colorado longer. There had to be a reasonable explanation. But deep down in that place where mothers know things about their children even when they don't want to, I already knew the truth. I pressed the call button. The phone rang once, twice, 3 times. Mom, you're back. Victoria's voice was bright, almost cheerful, like nothing was wrong, like she hadn't just destroyed my entire life. Victoria, my voice came out hoarse, barely above a whisper. Why are there strangers living in my villa? Silence on the other end. Not the silence of confusion. The silence of someone who's been caught and is trying to decide how to respond. Victoria, answer me. My voice was stronger now, rising. Why did you sell my home? I could hear her breathing on the other end of the line. Then came that sigh, that heavy, exaggerated sigh I'd heard 1,000 times before, the one she used when she thought I was being difficult or unreasonable. Mom, okay, listen. I can explain. Then explain. I was still standing in the hallway. Mrs. Patterson had gone back into her apartment, probably sensing the tension. I felt utterly alone. Explain to me why strangers are living in my villa. You're being dramatic, Victoria said, her voice taking on that edge of impatience I'd come to know so well. It's not that big of a deal. Not that big of a deal. The words exploded out of me. Jennifer, this is my home. I've lived here for over 2 decades. You had no right to sell it. Actually, Mom, I did have the right. Her voice was cold now, clinical. Remember that power of attorney you signed when you had your gallbladder surgery? Well, Brandon and I talked to a lawyer, and technically I could make financial decisions on your behalf if necessary. My mind was reeling. That was for medical emergencies. That was so you could pay my hospital bills if something went wrong during surgery. It wasn't permission to sell my property behind my back. Well, our lawyer said it was legal, so... She trailed off as if that settled everything. Your lawyer, I repeated slowly. Victoria, whose lawyer did you talk to? Brandon's friend from college. He practices real estate law. He looked over everything and said we were fine. Of course. Brandon's friend. Not an independent attorney, not someone who might have actually explained what power of attorney meant. Someone who would tell them exactly what they wanted to hear. Victoria, why would you do this? My voice cracked. I pressed my free hand against the wall, needing the support. Why would you sell my home without even telling me? Another pause. Then quietly, almost defensively, we needed the money, Mom. You needed the money. The words felt hollow in my mouth. Yes. Her voice was gaining strength now, justification. Brandon has debts. Serious ones. We were about to lose everything. The bank was threatening to foreclose on our house. We had creditors calling every single day. What were we supposed to do? You were supposed to talk to me. The words came out louder than I intended, echoing off the hallway walls. You were supposed to call me and explain the situation. You were supposed to ask for help, not just steal from me. We're not stealing, Mom. God, you always make everything so dramatic. I could hear the irritation building in her voice. We got fair market value for the villa. The money went into an account. You'll get some of it once we sort out Brandon's debts. Some of it. My villa, my security, my life's work, and I'd get some of it. Victoria, that was my home. That was my security. That was everything I worked my entire life to build. And now you'll have cash instead. Isn't that better? You're getting older, Mom. You don't need a big place like that anymore. Her tone was matter-of-fact, like she was explaining something obvious to a child. We were actually doing you a favor. You should be thanking us. A favor. She thought she was doing me a favor. Where exactly, I said slowly, carefully, did you think I was going to live when I got back from Colorado? I don't know. You have options. You can rent something smaller. Maybe get one of those senior apartments with activities and stuff. You'd probably like that better anyway. More people your age to hang out with. I closed my eyes, took a breath, then another. So let me understand this correctly. I said, my voice eerily calm now. You sold my home, took my money to pay your husband's debts, and just assumed I'd figure out where to live on my own. Well, you're smart, Mom. You always figure things out. Her tone was so casual, so dismissive, as if we were discussing what to have for dinner rather than the destruction of my entire life. Look, I really don't have time for this right now. Brandon and I are dealing with a lot of stress. The last thing I need is you making this harder than it has to be. Making this harder. I felt something cold settle in my chest, a clarity I hadn't felt in years. Victoria, do you hear yourself right now? Do you understand what you've done? What I've done is saved my family from financial ruin. You're my mother. You're supposed to want to help your children. Isn't that what parents do? Help, yes, but you didn't ask for help. You stole from me. It's not stealing if it's legal, Mom, and it was legal. I have the paperwork to prove it. Legal doesn't mean right, Victoria. She made a sound of frustration. You know what I'm not doing this with you right now. You're upset. I get it. But you'll see that this was the best decision for everyone once you calm down and think rationally about it. Rationally. I was standing in front of my own home, my former home with nowhere to go, and she wanted me to think rationally. Victoria, I'm standing in front of my own villa with nowhere to go. How is that rational? Stop being so dramatic. You're not homeless. You have money. You have resources. Just go to a hotel for tonight and we'll talk about this later when you're not being so emotional. When I'm not being so emotional. Victoria, don't you dare hang up on me. We need to discuss this, right? The line went dead. She'd hung up on me. My own daughter had sold my home, taken my security, and then hung up on me when I tried to talk about it. I stood there in the hallway, phone pressed to my ear, listening to the silence. The empty, hollow silence of a disconnected call. Mrs. Patterson's door opened a crack. Dear, are you all right? I heard shouting. I turned to look at her, and I must have looked terrible, because her expression immediately filled with concern and something like fear. I'm fine, I managed to say, though we both knew it was a lie. Just a family situation. She nodded slowly, her hand on her doorframe. If you need anything... Thank you, Helen. I need to find a hotel. As I walked back toward the elevator, pulling my suitcase behind me, I felt something shift inside me. The shock was fading. In its place came something colder, something sharper, something that felt almost like clarity. Victoria thought this was over. She thought I'd cry for a bit, maybe get angry and then accept what she'd done. Because what choice did I have? I was 72 years old. What was I going to do about it? But she'd made a mistake. A critical mistake. She'd forgotten something important about me. I didn't build my life by accepting things I couldn't change. I built it by changing the things I couldn't accept. And the hotel room was nothing like my villa. Beige walls, a generic landscape painting that could have been anywhere, a bed that was too soft, pillows that were too flat. The air conditioning made a rattling sound that set my teeth on edge. But it had a roof, it had a lock on the door, and right now that was all I needed. I sat on the edge of the bed, still in the same clothes I'd worn on the drive home. My suitcase lay open on the floor, untouched. I couldn't bring myself to unpack. Unpacking meant accepting that this was real, that I was actually staying in a hotel because my own daughter had stolen my home. My phone buzzed. A text from Victoria. Victoria, Mom, I know you're upset, but you need to understand we had no choice. Brandon's business failed and we were desperate. You would have done the same thing if you were in our position. I deleted it without responding. Another buzz. Victoria, also you're being really selfish right now. We're your family. Family helps each other. I deleted that one too. I turned off my phone and tossed it onto the nightstand. I couldn't deal with her right now. Not when my hands were still shaking. Not when I felt like the ground had opened up beneath me. But sitting here feeling sorry for myself wasn't going to solve anything. I needed to understand exactly what had happened. I needed to see the full picture. I pulled my laptop out of my carry-on bag. One of the benefits of spending 40 years working in the legal field was that I kept digital copies of everything important. Property deeds, bank statements, legal documents, all organized in folders, all backed up to the cloud. I opened the file labeled Property Documents and started reading through the deed to my villa, purchased outright in 2002 for $370,000. Every penny of it earned through years of saving, years of skipping vacations, years of driving an old car, years of making sacrifices because I wanted something that was mine, something that couldn't be taken away. Or so I'd thought. Next, I opened the power of attorney document I'd signed 2 years ago. I remembered that day clearly. I'd been scheduled for gallbladder surgery, a routine procedure, but still surgery. My lawyer, David Chen, had recommended having someone designated to make medical and financial decisions if I was incapacitated during the procedure. It's just a precaution, he'd said. Smart planning. You don't want to be in a hospital bed trying to sign checks if something goes wrong. I'd asked Victoria to take on that role. She was my only child. Who else would I trust? I read through the document now with fresh eyes, with 40 years of legal experience guiding my interpretation. The language was clear: medical decisions and related financial matters. Related financial matters. Hospital bills. Medical expenses. Decisions directly connected to my health care. It was never meant to give Victoria carte blanche to sell my property while I was on vacation. I pulled up my email and searched for messages from Victoria over the past month. There had to be something, some indication of what she'd been planning. The first email I found was from 5 weeks ago, right before my trip. Victoria, hey Mom, hope you're excited for your trip. We should grab lunch before you leave. Want to go over some paperwork while we're together. Nothing major, just making sure all your emergency contacts are updated. How's Thursday paperwork? My stomach tightened. I vaguely remembered that lunch now. We'd met at a cafe near her house in the suburbs. Victoria had seemed distracted, kept checking her phone. She'd brought a folder with her, said something about updating my emergency contacts and making sure all my documents were current. I'd signed a few things without reading them closely. She was my daughter. I trusted her. What had I signed? I kept scrolling through emails. 3 weeks ago, while I was in Colorado, there was an email from a real estate agency I'd never heard of. Brighton Coastal Realty. The subject line read, "Congratulations on your sale." My hands were trembling as I opened it. Dear Ms. Richardson, congratulations on the successful sale of your property at 1847 Ocean View Drive, Unit 15G. The closing is scheduled for next Tuesday at 2 p.m. Please review the attached documents and contact us if you have any questions. Best regards, Melissa Chang, Brighton Coastal Realty. There were attachments. PDFs of sale documents. I downloaded them and started reading, my legal training kicking in despite the emotional chaos. The sale price was listed as $850,000. The villa had appreciated significantly over the years, especially after the building renovation 5 years ago. But the money wasn't going into my account. According to the wire transfer instructions, it was being sent to an account in Victoria and Brandon's names. All of it. Every single penny of my life's work. My hands clenched into fists. I kept reading. There was my signature on the sales agreement. Except it wasn't quite my signature. I'd been signing my name the same way for 50 years. You develop a rhythm, a muscle memory. The way the E in Emma curves. The way the R in Richardson connects to the following letters. The slight flourish at the end that I'd developed in my 20s and never lost. This signature was close. Someone had practiced it, copied my style, but I could see the differences. The way the M in Emma looped slightly wrong. The way the R in Richardson was too sharp, too angular. Victoria had forged my signature. This wasn't just a misuse of power of attorney. This was fraud, forgery, elder abuse. She hadn't made a mistake or misunderstood the legal documents. She'd deliberately faked my signature to sell my home without my knowledge. I sat back feeling nauseous. How long had she been planning this? Had she thought about it during that lunch watching me sign those emergency contact forms? Had she practiced my signature at home trying to get it just right? Had Brandon helped her, or was this all her idea? 0 words for part 1, or would you prefer to review what I have so far first? I forced myself to keep reading, to dig deeper. If Victoria had forged my signature on the sale documents, what else had she done? I opened another folder on my laptop. Bank statements. I'd always been meticulous about my finances. 40 years in the legal field had taught me that much. I downloaded statements from the past 6 months and started reviewing them line by line. And there it was. Small withdrawals I hadn't made. Nothing huge. $2,000 here, $1,500 there, $3,000 from my savings account. I scrolled back further. The withdrawals had started 6 months ago. Always just under $10,000, small enough that I might not notice right away, especially since I'd been busy planning my vacation. I added up the numbers. My hands were shaking so badly I had to use the calculator app on my phone. $18,000. Victoria had been siphoning money from me for 6 months. I pressed my hands against my face, trying to steady my breathing. This was worse than I'd thought. So much worse. This wasn't a desperate decision made in a moment of panic. This was calculated, planned, methodical. My daughter had been stealing from me for half a year, and I'd been too trusting to notice. I thought about Brandon, his gambling debts according to what that couple at my door had mentioned. I'd always known he was irresponsible with money. There had been warning signs over the years, late mortgage payments, maxed out credit cards that time, 3 years ago, when Victoria had called crying because they couldn't make payroll at Brandon's consulting firm. But I'd never imagined it was this bad. Bad enough that they'd resort to this. Or maybe this was all Victoria. Maybe Brandon was just the excuse. Maybe my daughter had looked at me and seen nothing but a source of money. An ATM she could access whenever she needed cash. I didn't know anymore. I didn't know my own daughter anymore. The woman who used to call me every Sunday just to chat. The woman who'd cried in my arms when her first boyfriend broke her heart in high school. The woman who'd asked me to help her pick out her wedding dress, who'd held my hand in the delivery room when Sophia was born. Where had that person gone? When had she become someone who could do this to her own mother? I stood up and walked to the window. The hotel overlooked a parking lot. Gray concrete, yellow lines cars coming and going. People living their normal lives while mine fell apart. My phone buzzed again. Another text from Victoria. Victoria, Mom, you're not answering. We need to talk about this rationally. You can't just ignore reality. The house is sold. The money is being used for what we need. You need to accept that and move forward. I stared at that message. The audacity of it. The sheer entitlement. Accept it and move forward. As if I had no choice. As if I was just supposed to roll over and let her get away with this. But even as I stood there, even as the hurt threatened to consume me, something else was building underneath it. Something stronger than pain. Resolve. Victoria thought she'd won. She thought she'd gotten away with it. She'd taken my home, my money, my trust, and she'd hung up on me like I was an inconvenience. But she'd made one critical mistake. She'd underestimated me. I'd spent 40 years in the legal field. I knew how the system worked. I knew what fraud looked like. I knew how to build a case. and I knew people who could help me. I picked up my phone and scrolled to a different contact. David Chen, my lawyer, my friend. Someone I'd known for 30 years back when we were both young and ambitious and working 60-hour weeks at Morrison & Associates. It was late, almost 9 in the evening, but I called anyway. He picked up on the second ring. Emma. His voice was concerned. David had caller ID and he knew I wouldn't call this late unless something was wrong. Everything all right? David? My voice was steadier than I expected. I need your help. My daughter just stole everything from me and I need to get it back. There was a pause. Then, I'm listening. I told him everything. The vacation, coming home to find strangers in my villa, the phone call with Victoria, the forged signature I'd found, the 6 months of unauthorized withdrawals. David listened without interrupting. I could hear him making notes, the scratch of pen on paper. After 40 years of friendship, I knew his habits. When I finished, he was quiet for a long moment. Emma, he finally said, his voice careful and measured. What you're describing isn't just wrong. It's illegal. Multiple counts of fraud, forgery, elder abuse, misuse of power of attorney. This isn't a civil dispute. This is criminal. Can I get my home back? That's the goal, he said. But I need to be honest with you about what we're facing. The couple who bought your villa, they're innocent victims in this too. They purchased the property in good faith. Getting the sale reversed is going to require proving that the transaction was fraudulent from the start. I have proof, I said, thinking of the documents I'd found. The forged signature, the unauthorized use of power of attorney, the fact that I was out of the country and had no knowledge of the sale. That's a good start. I heard papers rustling. We'll need more, though. We need to document everything. Timeline of events, communications with Victoria, proof that you never intended to sell, testimony from people who can verify your mental competency and that you weren't planning to move into assisted living. Mrs. Patterson, I said immediately. My neighbor. She saw me the day I got back. She can testify that I had no idea what had happened. Good. Who else? I thought for a moment. Dr. Foster, my doctor. I just had my annual checkup before the trip. She can confirm I'm of sound mind and body. And there's Margaret Chen, no relation to you, from my book club. I had lunch with her 2 days before I left for Colorado. I told her how excited I was to come home. David was writing it all down. We'll need bank records showing the unauthorized withdrawals. We'll need the original power of attorney document to show it was meant for medical purposes only. And Emma, we need to move fast. The longer that couple lives in your villa, the more complicated this gets. How fast? I'll file for an emergency injunction first thing tomorrow morning. That should freeze any further transfer of funds and put the property status in question. Then we'll petition for a full hearing. He paused. Emma, I need you to understand something. This is going to get ugly. Victoria is your daughter. Taking her to court, potentially pressing criminal charges, that's going to destroy whatever relationship you have left. She destroyed it when she forged my name and sold my home, I said quietly. I gave her life. I raised her. I sacrificed for her. And she repaid me by stealing everything I worked for. Whatever relationship we had ended the moment she decided I was worth less to her than money. David was quiet for a moment. Then, all right, get some rest tonight if you can. Come to my office at 9 tomorrow morning. We'll start building the case. After we hung up, I sat in the darkness of that hotel room for a long time. Outside the parking lot, lights hummed. A couple walked by below laughing about something. Normal people doing normal things. Tomorrow, I thought. Tomorrow I fight back. David's office was in the downtown high-rise that overlooked the bay. I'd been here countless times over the years for document reviews, for consultations when Tom had passed, and I'd needed help with his estate for the power of attorney signing that had led to all of this. The building looked exactly the same. Glass and steel, marble floors, that distinctive smell of furniture polish and expensive coffee. But I felt different walking into it. Not like the woman who'd visited 2 years ago signing papers as a precaution before a routine surgery. That woman had been trusting. Naive, maybe. The woman walking in today knew better. David was waiting in the lobby. He'd aged since I'd seen him last, more gray in his hair, deeper lines around his eyes. But his handshake was firm, and his expression was serious. Come on up, he said simply. I've already cleared my morning. We rode the elevator in silence. I was grateful he didn't try to make small talk or offer empty reassurances. David had always been practical that way. We'd worked together long enough that he knew when to speak and when to listen. His office looked exactly as I remembered. Floor-to-ceiling bookshelves filled with legal texts. A massive oak desk covered in neat stacks of files. The same coffee maker in the corner that had been there since 1987 when we were both young paralegals pulling all-nighters. "Sit," he said, gesturing to the leather chair across from his desk. "Coffee, please." He poured us both a cup black for me, cream and sugar for him, just like always, and settled into his chair. "Tell me everything again," he said. Slowly this time, every detail you can remember. So I did. I started with the vacation, the return home, the stranger at my door, the phone call with Victoria, the forged signatures I'd found, the months of small withdrawals from my account. David listened, taking notes in his precise handwriting. Occasionally, he'd ask a clarifying question. "What time did you arrive home? Exactly what did Victoria say when you called? Do you have copies of the bank statements?" When I finished, he sat back and rubbed his temples. "Emma, I'm so sorry this happened to you." "I don't need apologies," I said quietly. "I need to know if I can fix this." He leaned forward, spreading the documents I'd printed across his desk. "Let me be very clear about something. What Victoria did wasn't just wrong. It was illegal on multiple levels. Fraud, forgery, elder abuse, misuse of power of attorney. This isn't a gray area. This is criminal. Can I get my home back?" "Yes," he said firmly. "That's the goal. But I need you to understand what we're facing. The couple who bought your villa, they're innocent in this. They purchased the property in good faith with what appeared to be proper documentation. Getting the sale reversed is going to require proving that the transaction was fraudulent from the start." "I have proof," I said, pointing to the documents. "The forged signature, the unauthorized use of power of attorney, the fact that I was out of the country and had no knowledge of the sale." "That's an excellent start." David pulled out a legal pad. "But we need more. We need to build an airtight case, timeline of events, communications with Victoria, proof that you never intended to sell, medical documentation showing you're mentally competent, testimony from people who can verify your state of mind." He started making a list. "Mrs. Patterson, your neighbor. Dr. Foster, your physician. Margaret Chen, your friend. Anyone else who can testify to your intentions and mental state." I thought carefully. "There's Robert Martinez at the bank. I've been with Coastal Federal for 20 years. He handles my accounts. He'd know I'd never authorized those withdrawals." "Good. We'll need bank records showing the unauthorized withdrawals. We'll need the original power of attorney document to show it was meant for medical purposes only." He looked up at me. "And Emma, we're going to need expert witnesses. A forensic document examiner to analyze the forged signature. Maybe a private investigator to look into Victoria and Brandon's financial situation." "How much is this going to cost?" David waved a hand. "Don't worry about that right now. You're my friend. We'll figure it out. I'm more concerned about the emotional cost." He paused, his expression softening. "Taking your daughter to court, potentially having her face criminal charges, that's going to be devastating." "She made her choice," I said. "I'm just making sure she faces the consequences." 2 days later, I was back in David's office. This time, there were 2 other people in the room. The first was Marcus Taylor, a man in his early 60s with steel gray hair and sharp eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. David introduced him as a forensic document examiner, former FBI, now working as a consultant. "Mrs. Richardson," Marcus said, shaking my hand. His grip was firm, professional. "I understand you need some signatures analyzed." "Yes," I said, handing him the copies of the sale documents. "This signature here. It's supposed to be mine, but it's not." Marcus pulled out a magnifying glass, an actual magnifying glass like something from a detective novel, and examined the signature carefully. Then he asked to see examples of my real signature. I'd brought my checkbook, some old letters, my driver's license. He compared them side by side, his expression growing more intent. "Mrs. Richardson," he finally said, looking up. "May I ask, do you know who forged this signature, my daughter?" He nodded slowly, unsurprised. "That makes sense. Forgery is often easier when the person has access to multiple examples of the real signature. They can practice, but there are tells." He pointed to the screen where he'd projected enlarged images of both signatures. "See here, your natural signature has a very distinctive flow. The E in Emma curves back slightly and connects to the first M, But in the forged signature, that connection is absent. The person who signed this tried to copy your style but didn't understand the muscle memory behind it. I leaned closer. He was right. I'd been signing my name the same way for 50 years. You don't think about it. You just do it. But someone trying to copy it would have to think about every stroke. There are at least 8 distinct differences I can identify, Marcus continued. The pressure points are wrong. The speed of writing is inconsistent. And most tellingly, there's a slight tremor in the forged signature that suggests hesitation. Someone was nervous when they signed your name. Can you testify to this in court? David asked. Absolutely. I'll prepare a full report with detailed analysis. This signature is definitively not authentic. Marcus looked at me. I'm sorry this happened to you, Mrs. Richardson. No one should have to go through this. The second expert was Jessica Walsh, a woman in her late 30s with auburn hair pulled back in a neat bun and an air of quiet competence. David introduced her as a private investigator specializing in financial fraud. Mrs. Richardson, she said, her handshake as firm as Marcus's. David's briefed me on the situation. I'd like to investigate your son-in-law's financial situation if you'll authorize it. We need to establish motive why they did this. Of course, I said. Whatever you need. Jessica pulled out a tablet. I'll need some basic information to start. Victoria and Brandon's full names, address, place of employment, any financial institutions you know they use. I provided what I could. Victoria's full name was Victoria Emma Richardson Parker. She'd kept my middle name, something that now felt like a bitter irony. Brandon was Brandon Michael Parker. They lived in Oak Ridge, a suburban development about 30 miles inland. Victoria had worked in marketing but had been laid off 6 months ago. Brandon owned Parker Consulting Group. The consulting business, I said. I think that's where the problem started. Victoria mentioned something once about them missing payroll. Jessica made notes. That's helpful. I'll look into the business finances, tax records if I can access them legally, banking information, credit history. She looked up. Mrs. Richardson, I need to warn you. What I find might be difficult. Are you prepared for that? I need to know the truth, I said. Whatever it is. She nodded. I'll start immediately. Give me 5 days. I'll have a preliminary report by then. After they left, David and I sat in his office, the weight of what we were undertaking settling over us. This is really happening, I said quietly. Yes, David agreed. Emma, are you sure there's still time to back out? We could try mediation, family counseling, some way to resolve this without holding Victoria accountable. I finished. No, I'm sure. He studied my face for a long moment, then nodded. All right, I'll start drafting the emergency injunction. We'll file tomorrow. Jessica Walsh worked fast. 3 days later, she called and asked to meet at David's office. Her voice on the phone was careful, measured. I found quite a bit, she said. You'll want to be sitting down for this. We met that afternoon. Jessica arrived with a thick folder and her tablet. She looked tired, like she'd been working around the clock. Mrs. Richardson, she began, settling into a chair. I'm going to be direct with you. Brandon Parker is in very serious financial trouble, much worse than you probably imagined. She opened her tablet and pulled up a spreadsheet. I started with his business, Parker Consulting Group. According to public records and some information I was able to obtain through, let's say, professional channels, the business has been operating at a loss for the past 3 years. 3 years? I felt my stomach sink. Yes, and it gets worse. Brandon's been falsifying tax documents to hide the losses, showing income that doesn't exist. The IRS hasn't caught on yet, but they will. That's federal tax fraud. David was taking notes, his expression grim. Then there's his personal debt, Jessica continued. I found records of gambling, 3 different casinos in Atlantic City. He's a regular at 2 of them high-stakes poker and blackjack tables. According to my sources, he's down approximately $85,000 across those 3 casinos alone. 85,000, I repeated numbly. That's just the casinos. He also has online gambling accounts, sports betting mostly, another 40,000 in losses there. She flipped through pages. Then there are the private loans. I found evidence of at least 5 different loans from private lenders, the kind that charge interest rates of 20% or higher. Another 90,000. The numbers were spinning in my head. How much total? Jessica looked at me, her expression sympathetic. Including credit card debt and the business losses, Brandon Parker is approximately $325,000 in debt. I felt like the air had been sucked out of the room. Victoria knew, Jessica said quietly. I found emails between them going back 18 months. She knew about the gambling. She knew about the business failures. They've been trying to hide it from everyone. Friends, family, their kids. Show me, I said. Jessica pulled up the emails on her tablet. I read through them, my heart sinking with each one. Brandon to Victoria, 14 months ago. We need to figure something out. The creditors are getting aggressive. Maybe we could borrow from your mom. Victoria to Brandon, 14 months ago. I don't want to ask her for more money. She's already helped us so much. Brandon to Victoria, 12 months ago. What about her house? It's got to be worth close to $1 million. If we could just access that equity somehow. Victoria to Brandon, 12 months ago. I can't ask her to take out a loan on her house. She'd never agree to that. Brandon to Victoria, 8 months ago. What if we didn't ask? I stopped reading. My hands were shaking too badly to hold the tablet steady. There's more, Jessica said gently. Victoria started researching power of attorney sales about 6 months ago. I found her browser history. She was looking at forums, asking questions on legal advice websites. She knew exactly what she was doing. David leaned forward. This establishes premeditation. This wasn't a desperate last-minute decision. This was planned. There's something else, Jessica said, her voice even more careful now. Something I wasn't expecting to find. She pulled up another document. Brandon doesn't just owe money to casinos and private lenders. He owes money to an organization called Volkov Enterprises. What's that? I asked. Jessica and David exchanged glances. Russian organized crime, David said quietly. They operate as a legitimate business on paper, but they're known for loan sharking and money laundering. How much does he owe them? $150,000, Jessica said, plus interest that's accruing at a aggressive rate. I felt cold. Is my family in danger? Potentially, Jessica said. I found threatening emails. Nothing explicit, but the implication is clear. They want their money and they're not patient people. I thought about Sophia and Lucas. My grandchildren, sweet, innocent children who had nothing to do with their father's bad decisions. Does Victoria know about this? I asked. Jessica nodded. She knows. There's an email from 3 months ago where Brandon tells her they need to liquidate assets, or the Russians will come for the house. Victoria responded that she was working on it. The room was silent for a long moment. So they sold my villa, I said slowly, not just for gambling debts, but to pay off the Russian mob. It appears that way, Jessica confirmed. I stood up and walked to the window. Downtown spread out below me. People going about their business. Normal lives, normal problems. My daughter had stolen my home to save her husband from Russian gangsters. Part of me wanted to understand, wanted to sympathize. If your husband was in danger, if your children might be at risk, wouldn't you do anything to protect them? But she could have come to me, could have told me the truth. We could have gone to the police. We could have figured something out together. Instead, she'd chosen to betray me, to forge my signature, to steal my security, to leave me homeless. Mrs. Richardson, Jessica's voice pulled me back to the present. There's one more thing. I found evidence that Victoria opened an offshore account in the Cayman Islands 2 weeks after the villa sale. How much? $60,000 was transferred there. The account is in her name, only not Brandon's. David's eyes sharpened. She's hiding assets. She knows this might catch up with her, so she's protecting money where it can't be easily accessed. I turned back to face them. What does all this mean for the case? It means we have motive, David said. We have premeditation. We have evidence of planning. This wasn't a misunderstanding or a misuse of power of attorney. This was calculated fraud. Can we use the information about the Russian mob? I asked. Jessica hesitated. It's complicated. That information gets into dangerous territory, but the FBI might be interested in it. The FBI, Volkov Enterprises, is under federal investigation, Jessica explained. If Brandon's dealings with them are substantial enough, the FBI might want to know. They could potentially offer your family protection in exchange for testimony. I sat back down, my mind reeling. This had gone so far beyond what I'd imagined. This wasn't just my daughter being selfish or greedy. This was a whole web of crime and deception and danger. "What do we do next?" I asked David. "We file the emergency injunction," he said. "We freeze Victoria and Brandon's accounts. We present all this evidence to the court, and we let the legal system work." He paused, looking at me seriously. "Emma, once we file this, there's no going back. Victoria will know you're coming after her. Things will escalate. Are you ready for that?" I thought about my villa, the home I'd worked 40 years to buy, the place where I'd planned to spend the rest of my days. I thought about my bank account lighter by $18,000 thanks to unauthorized withdrawals. I thought about the forged signature, the calculated planning, the 6 months of lies. And I thought about Victoria's voice on the phone. "You're basically homeless now, Mom." "Yes," I said. "I'm ready." Against David's advice, he'd told me repeatedly that all communication should go through him. I decided to see Victoria in person before we filed the injunction. I needed to look my daughter in the eye, needed to give her one chance to explain herself face to face. Maybe David was right that it was a bad idea. Maybe it would hurt our case somehow. But this was my daughter, the child I'd given birth to, raised, loved. I couldn't take her to court without seeing her first. I drove to Oak Ridge on a Saturday morning. The suburbs sprawled out in neat rows, identical houses with identical lawns, the kind of planned community where everything looked perfect on the surface. Victoria's house was on Maple Lane, a modest 2-story colonial with cream-colored siding. The grass was neatly mowed. There was a basketball hoop in the driveway and a minivan parked in front of the garage. From the outside, it looked like the picture of suburban success. You'd never guess the people who lived here were $300,000 in debt and had just committed fraud. I sat in my car for a moment, gathering my courage. Through the living room window, I could see movement. Victoria was home. I got out and walked up the front path. My legs felt unsteady. My heart was pounding. I rang the doorbell. Footsteps inside. Then the door opened. Victoria stood there in yoga pants and an oversized sweater, her hair pulled back in a messy ponytail. When she saw me, her expression shifted from curious to annoyed. "Mom, what are you doing here?" "We need to talk." "I don't think that's a good idea right now. You're obviously still upset, and I really don't want to deal with more drama." I stepped forward. Something in my expression must have told her I wasn't leaving because she backed up and I walked inside without being invited. The house was exactly as I remembered it. Same beige carpet. Same furniture we'd picked out together 5 years ago when they'd first moved in. Family photos on the walls, including several of me with Sophia and Lucas. I wondered if she felt any shame looking at those photos, knowing what she'd done. "Where are the children?" I asked. "Soccer practice. Brandon took them." Victoria crossed her arms defensively. "Mom, seriously, what do you want?" I turned to face her, really looked at her. She looked thinner than I remembered. Tired. There were dark circles under her eyes and strands of gray in her dark hair that hadn't been there before. "I want to understand," I said quietly. "I want you to explain to me face to face how you could do this." She looked away. "I already explained. We were desperate. Desperate enough to forge my signature, desperate enough to steal my home." "I didn't steal." "Yes, you did." My voice was sharp. "You forged my name on legal documents. You sold my property without my knowledge or consent. You took $850,000 that belonged to me. That's theft, Victoria. That's fraud. That's elder abuse." Her face flushed. "It's not elder abuse. God, Mom, you're so dramatic." "I know about the gambling," I said, Daddy said. She froze. "I know Brandon owes $325,000. I know about the casinos, the online betting, the private loans." I took a step closer. "I know about Volkov Enterprises." All the color drained from her face. "How did you—" "I hired a private investigator. A very good one. She found everything." I paused. "I also know you've been planning this for 6 months, that you researched power of attorney sales, that you practiced forging my signature, that you opened an offshore account to hide assets." Victoria's hands were shaking now. She looked toward the stairs like she was thinking about running, or maybe looking for Brandon to come save her. "You could have asked me for help," I said, my voice breaking slightly despite my best efforts. "You could have told me the truth. We could have gone to the police about the Russians. We could have figured something out together." "You wouldn't have understood." she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I wouldn't have understood that your husband gambled away your future, that he's involved with organized crime." "You're right, I wouldn't have understood that." I shook my head. "But I would have helped you anyway, because I'm your mother, because I love you, because that's what family does." "That's what I was doing," Victoria said, her voice rising. "I was trying to save my family by destroying me." "You don't need that villa." The words burst out of her. "You're one person living in this huge, expensive property. It's too much for you anyway. You should be downsizing, moving into something more manageable." "That wasn't your decision to make." "Well, someone had to make it," she was shouting now. "You just live in your perfect little bubble, not caring about anyone else's problems. We were drowning, Mom, drowning, and you couldn't be bothered to notice, because you never told me. I shouldn't have to tell you. You should have seen it. You should have offered to help before it got this bad." I stared at her. The logic was so twisted, so backwards, that I couldn't even process it. "So this is my fault," I said slowly. "I'm to blame because I didn't notice you were in trouble, because I didn't offer to bankrupt myself to fix your problems." "That's not what I—" "Yes, it is. That's exactly what you're saying." I took a breath. "Victoria, I've given you money before, thousands of dollars over the years. For your wedding, for the house down payment. When Brandon's business had problems. I've helped whenever you asked. But it was never enough, was it?" She didn't answer. "How much of the $850,000 is left?" Her eyes widened slightly. We used it to pay off the debts." "How much is left, Victoria?" "It's about $200,000, she admitted quietly. "So you spent $650,000 in 3 weeks. We had a lot of debts to pay off. And the $60,000 in the Cayman Islands account, was that a debt too?" She went pale again. "How did you know about that?" "I told you. My investigator is very good." I studied her face. "You knew this was wrong. You knew that sooner or later I'd find out. So you hid money where I couldn't get to it." "I was protecting our future." "No, you were protecting yourself." I felt suddenly tired, bone deep exhausted. "I came here hoping you'd have some explanation, some reason that would make sense, but there isn't one, is there? You just chose Brandon over me, chose money over our relationship, chose the easy criminal path over doing the right thing." "Mom, I'm filing an emergency injunction on Monday," I said, "to freeze your accounts and reverse the sale of my villa. I'm also pressing criminal charges for fraud, forgery, and elder abuse." Victoria's eyes went wide. "You can't—" "Yes, I can, and I will." "Mom, please." Tears were streaming down her face now. "If you do this, we'll lose everything. Brandon could go to jail. The kids will—" "You should have thought about the kids before you committed fraud." "Please," she grabbed my arm. "I'm begging you, don't do this. We'll pay you back. We'll sell this house. We'll figure something out. Just please don't press charges." I gently removed her hand from my arm. "It's too late for that." "Mom, I'm your daughter. Are you—" I looked at her. "Because my daughter wouldn't have done this to me. My daughter wouldn't have stolen my home. My daughter wouldn't have laughed at me and called me homeless." She was sobbing now, but I felt nothing, no sympathy, no urge to comfort her. She'd burned all of that away when she'd decided I was worth less than money. "I'm sorry," she gasped. "Mom, I'm so sorry. I made a terrible mistake. Please." "You made a choice," I corrected. "Many choices over 6 months. This wasn't a mistake. This was calculated, planned, executed." I walked toward the door, stopped, turned back. "One more thing. I'll be petitioning for temporary custody of Sophia and Lucas while this is sorted out. If you or Brandon are arrested, someone will need to take care of them. You can't take my children. I'm not taking them. I'm protecting them from the consequences of your choices." I left then, walking out into the bright Saturday morning. Behind me, I could hear Victoria's sobs. Part of me, the mother part, wanted to go back, to comfort her, to make it better. But I kept walking. She'd made her choice. Now I was making mine. That night I sat in my hotel room, still the same generic beige box I'd been living in for the past week, and looked at the evidence spread out on the bed. Bank statements, emails, the forged signature analysis from Marcus, Jessica's investigation report, the power of attorney document I'd signed 2 years ago, never imagining it would be used against me. Tomorrow, David would file the emergency injunction. Tomorrow, this would all become official, public, legal. Tomorrow, I would be taking my daughter to court. My phone rang. David. Emma, just checking in. You still okay with moving forward tomorrow? I looked at the evidence again, thought about Victoria's tears, about Sophia and Lucas who would be caught in the middle of this, about the family that would never be the same. Yes, I said. I'm sure. Okay, get some rest. Tomorrow's going to be a long day. After he hung up, I sat there in the darkness for a while longer. I thought about Victoria as a baby, how she'd fit so perfectly in my arms, how she'd look at me with those big eyes trusting me completely. I thought about her as a little girl, how she'd run to me when she fell and scraped her knee, how she'd climb into bed with me during thunderstorms, how she'd said, "I love you, Mommy," in that sweet, lisping voice. I thought about her as a teenager, the arguments, the slammed doors, but also the late-night talks, the times she'd still need her mom even when she pretended she didn't. I thought about her as a young woman, her college graduation, her wedding day when she'd cried and said, "Thank you for everything, Mom. I couldn't have done any of this without you." That Victoria, the one I'd raised, the one I'd loved unconditionally, where had she gone? Or had she always been capable of this, and I just hadn't wanted to see it? I didn't know anymore. What I did know was this. Tomorrow I would walk into that courthouse. Tomorrow I would fight for what was mine. Tomorrow I would show Victoria that actions have consequences. Because if I didn't, what message would that send? That it was okay to steal from your parents, that family could betray you and face no consequences, that love meant accepting abuse. No, I'd spent my whole life fighting to get an education, fighting to build a career, fighting to buy my home, fighting to create something that was mine. I wasn't going to stop fighting now. I set my phone aside, turned off the lights, closed my eyes. Tomorrow the battle began, and I was ready. I woke at 5 a.m, though I hadn't really slept. Every time I'd closed my eyes, I'd seen Victoria's face. Sometimes as a child, innocent and trusting. Sometimes as she'd looked on Saturday, tears streaming down her cheeks as she begged me not to press charges. I got up, made coffee in the small hotel room maker. It tasted like burnt plastic, but I needed the caffeine. Put on the navy suit I'd worn to court hundreds of times during my paralegal years. Pearl earrings Tom had given me on our 30th anniversary. I looked at myself in the mirror. 72 years old. Gray hair pulled back in a neat bun. Lines around my eyes. Hands that trembled slightly no matter how hard I tried to steady them. But my eyes were clear. Determined. Today I was going to fight. David picked me up at 7:30. We needed to be at the courthouse by 8 to file the paperwork before the 9 o'clock hearing. He'd pulled strings to get us in front of Judge Patricia Whitmore so quickly she was known for taking elder abuse cases seriously. "You ready?" he asked as I got into his car. Yes. He studied my face for a moment. "Emma, there's still time to—" "I'm not backing down, David." He nodded and pulled out into traffic. We drove in silence for a while. Downtown slowly came into view the courthouse, an imposing stone building that had stood since 1923. I'd been inside it countless times, but never like this. Never as the plaintiff in a case against my own daughter. "Victoria's lawyer is Todd Brenner," David said, breaking the silence. "Young guy, about 35, works for a small firm in the suburbs. I did some digging on him last night. And he was suspended from practicing law for 2 years about 5 years ago. Ethics violations. He was accused of helping a client hide assets during a divorce proceeding." David glanced at me. "He's friends with Brandon. College buddies. They were in the same fraternity." I felt my stomach tighten. So Victoria didn't just hire any lawyer. She hired someone who was already willing to bend the rules. "Looks that way?" We pulled into the courthouse parking garage. David grabbed his briefcase from the back seat. It was stuffed with documents, all the evidence we'd gathered. The forged signatures, the bank statements, Jessica's investigation report, Marcus's forensic analysis. "One more thing," David said as we walked toward the elevator. "Jessica called me last night. She found something else. About Sophia." My heart stopped. What about Sophia? Victoria wasn't lying when she said the Russians were threatening the family. Jessica found surveillance photos. Someone's been following Sophia to school, taking pictures of her. I felt cold. My granddaughter is in danger. Maybe, or maybe it was just intimidation. But Jessica thinks we should contact the FBI. Volkov Enterprises is already under federal investigation. They'd be interested in this. Do it, I said immediately. I don't care what happens to Victoria or Brandon, but Sophia and Lucas need to be safe. I already reached out. There's an agent named Sarah Morrison who specializes in organized crime. She wants to meet with you after the hearing today. The elevator doors opened. We stepped into the lobby. Marble floors, high ceilings, the weight of decades of justice and injustice hanging in the air. And there by the security checkpoint I saw them. Victoria, Brandon, and Todd Brenner. Victoria looked worse than she had on Saturday. Her eyes were red and puffy. She'd lost weight, her clothes hung loose on her frame. She saw me and grabbed Brandon's arm. Brandon looked angry. His jaw was set. His eyes were hard. When he saw me, he said something to Todd, who turned to look. Todd Brenner was younger than I'd expected. Mid-30s, like David had said. Expensive suit. Too much confidence in his walk as he approached us. David Chen, he said, extending his hand. Todd Brenner. I represent the Parkers. David shook his hand briefly. Professional. Cool. Mr. Brenner. Todd turned to me. His smile was practiced. Sympathetic. Completely fake. Mrs. Richardson, I'm so sorry we're meeting under these circumstances. I'm sure we can work this out amicably. Amicably. I kept my voice level. Your clients forged my signature and stole my home. What's amicable about that? The smile faltered. I think there's been a misunderstanding about the scope of the power of attorney. There's been no misunderstanding, David cut in. Your clients committed fraud. We have extensive evidence, multiple forms of documentation, expert testimony. This isn't a civil dispute. This is criminal activity. Todd's expression hardened. Those are serious accusations. I hope you're prepared to back them up. We are. Victoria stepped forward. She looked like she hadn't slept in days. Mom, please, can we talk just for a minute before this gets out of control? It's already out of control, I said. You made sure of that when you sold my villa. I made a mistake. You made many mistakes. Over 6 months. This wasn't one bad decision. This was calculated theft. Brandon moved beside Victoria, put his hand on her shoulder, possessive, protective. Mrs. Richardson, you need to understand the position we were in. We were desperate. Then you should have asked for help, or gone to the police, not committed fraud. The police? Brandon's laugh was bitter. You don't understand what we're dealing with. The people I owe money to, they don't care about the police. They don't follow rules. Neither do you, apparently. His face flushed red. You self-righteous... Mr. Parker. David's voice was sharp. I'd suggest you control yourself. Threatening behavior toward my client won't help your case. Todd put a hand on Brandon's arm. Let's all take a breath. We're about to go before a judge. Let's maintain professionalism. The bailiff appeared. Emergency injunction hearing for Richardson v. Parker, Judge Whitmore's courtroom. 5 minutes. My heart started pounding. This was it. Judge Patricia Whitmore's courtroom was smaller than I'd expected. Wood paneling, rows of benches. The judge's bench elevated imposing. The Florida state flag on one side, the American flag on the other. Judge Whitmore entered through a side door. She was in her mid-60s, with short gray hair and sharp blue eyes that seemed to miss nothing. Her expression was stern, but not unkind. All rise, the bailiff intoned. We stood. Judge Whitmore took her seat and gestured for us to sit. This is an emergency motion for injunction in the matter of Richardson versus Parker, she said, looking down at the paperwork in front of her. Mr. Chen, you're representing the plaintiff. Yes, Your Honor. And Mr. Brenner for the defendants. Yes, Your Honor. Judge Whitmore looked up. Her gaze swept over all of us, lingering for a moment on Victoria, who looked like she might faint. Mr. Chen, this is your motion. Make your case. David stood. He was calm, composed, in his element. Your Honor, this case involves the fraudulent sale of my client's primary residence while she was on vacation. The defendants used a medical power of attorney meant solely for healthcare decisions to forge Mrs. Richardson's signature on sale documents and transfer her property without her knowledge or consent. He walked to the evidence table, picked up the first document. This is the power of attorney in question, signed 2 years ago before a routine medical procedure. The language is explicit, medical decisions and related financial matters. not real estate transactions, not property sales. Judge Whitmore took the document, read it carefully. Her expression didn't change, but something flickered in her eyes. This is the forged signature on the sales documents. David held up Marcus's analysis projected on a screen. We have expert testimony from a forensic document examiner, former FBI, showing 8 distinct differences between the defendant's forged signature and Mrs. Richardson's authentic signature. The images appeared on the screen. Even from where I sat, I could see the differences. The wrong curve of the E, the too sharp angle of the R. We also have evidence of premeditation. David pulled up email printouts. Communications between the defendants going back 6 months, discussing how to access Mrs. Richardson's assets. Browser history showing research into power of attorney sales. Purchases of materials used for forgery tracing paper, specialized pens books on document authentication. Judge Whitmore was leaning forward now, studying the evidence. Furthermore, Your Honor, we have bank records showing unauthorized withdrawals totaling $18,000 over 6 months. The defendant had access to Mrs. Richardson's accounts through the power of attorney and systematically drained funds. Your Honor, Todd started to stand. You'll have your turn, Mr. Brenner, Judge Whitmore said sharply. Sit down. Todd sat. David continued. Finally, Your Honor, we have evidence that 2 weeks after the fraudulent sale, the defendant Victoria Parker opened an offshore account in the Cayman Islands and transferred $60,000 money that rightfully belongs to Mrs. Richardson. That's not true, Victoria burst out. Mrs. Parker. Judge Whitmore's voice cracked like a whip. You will be silent unless I ask you a direct question. Do you understand? Victoria nodded, tears streaming down her face. David returned to our table. Your Honor, we're asking for an emergency injunction to freeze all accounts belonging to the defendants, to stay the property transfer pending a full investigation, and to prevent the defendants from leaving the state while this matter is resolved. Judge Whitmore was silent for a long moment. Then she turned to Todd. Mr. Brenner, your response? Todd stood. He looked less confident now, but he tried. Your Honor, my clients acknowledge that there's been a miscommunication about the scope of the power of attorney. However, they acted in good faith. Mrs. Richardson is 72 years old. She lives alone in a large property that requires significant upkeep. My clients believed they were acting in her best interests. By forging her signature, Judge Whitmore's voice was dry. We dispute that the signature was forged, Your Honor. Mrs. Richardson signed the power of attorney document. The signature on the sales documents may simply reflect changes in her handwriting due to age. Mr. Brenner, Judge Whitmore cut him off. I've been a judge for 23 years. I've seen many cases of elder abuse. Do you really expect me to believe that a 72-year-old woman's signature would change so dramatically in 2 years that it would show 8 distinct differences according to a forensic expert? Todd hesitated. Your Honor, we believe. What you believe is irrelevant. What matters is the evidence. She turned to Victoria. Mrs. Parker, stand up. Victoria stood slowly, shaking. Did you discuss the sale of your mother's property with her before proceeding? Victoria's voice was barely audible. I tried to bring it up, but the timing was never right. That's not what I asked. Did you have a conversation with your mother in which she explicitly agreed to sell her villa? Silence. Mrs. Parker, answer the question. No, Victoria whispered. But you thought that you could make major financial decisions for your mother without her knowledge, that the power of attorney she gave you for medical purposes extended to selling her home. I was trying to help. Help. Judge Whitmore's voice was sharp. You helped yourself to $850,000 that didn't belong to you. That's not help. That's theft. Todd tried again. Your Honor, my clients were in desperate financial straits. Mr. Parker's business failed. They were facing foreclosure. They had creditors threatening them. Then they should have filed for bankruptcy, Judge Whitmore snapped, or asked Mrs. Richardson for help, or consulted a financial advisor. What they shouldn't have done is commit fraud. She looked down at her notes, then back up at all of us. Here's what's going to happen. I'm granting the emergency injunction. All bank accounts belonging to Victoria Parker and Brandon Parker are frozen effective immediately. The property transfer of 1847 Ocean View Drive, Unit 15G, is stayed pending a full hearing. The defendants are prohibited from leaving the state of Florida. Victoria let out a sob. Brandon put his arm around her. Furthermore, Judge Whitmore continued, I'm referring this case to the district attorney's office for potential criminal prosecution. What I've seen here today isn't a civil matter. This is fraud, forgery, and elder abuse. Your Honor, please, Todd began. I'm not finished, Mr. Brenner. Judge Whitmore's gaze was steel. I'm also ordering a full accounting of all funds from the sale. Where did the money go? How much is left that will be documented and presented at the full hearing? She looked at Victoria and Brandon. I want to be very clear with you both. You're in serious legal trouble. The evidence against you is overwhelming. If I were you, I'd be thinking very carefully about how to make this right. She turned to me. Mrs. Richardson, I'm sorry this happened to you. The couple currently residing in your villa will be notified that the ownership is in dispute. We'll sort this out at the full hearing. She banged her gavel. Full hearing is scheduled for 6 weeks from today. This court is adjourned. As Judge Whitmore left, I felt David's hand on my shoulder. We won, he said quietly, but it didn't feel like winning. It felt like the beginning of a war. In the hallway outside the courtroom, Victoria collapsed onto a bench. Brandon paced beside her, his face red with anger. Todd was on his phone, probably calling someone to explain what had just happened. I stood with David, trying to process everything. What happens now? I asked. The injunction is in place. Their accounts are frozen. They can't touch any more money. The property transfer is on hold. David closed his briefcase. We have 6 weeks to prepare for the full hearing. That's when we'll ask the court to reverse the sale completely and award you damages. And the criminal charges, that's up to the DA now. Based on the evidence, I'd say Victoria and Brandon are both looking at serious felony charges. Fraud, forgery, elder abuse. They could face prison time. Prison time. My daughter could go to prison. Part of me felt satisfaction at that thought. Justice. Consequences. But another part of me, the mother part, felt sick. Emma, a new voice. I turned. A woman in her early 40s approached holding up a badge. FBI. I'm Special Agent Sarah Morrison. I understand you need to speak with me about Volkov Enterprises. Agent Morrison led David and me to a small conference room in the courthouse. She had red hair pulled back in a severe bun and green eyes that were sharp and assessing. Tell me everything about Brandon Parker's connection to Volkov Enterprises, she said, pulling out a recorder. And I mean everything. I told her what Jessica had found. The $150,000 debt. The threatening emails. The surveillance photos of Sophia. Morrison's expression grew darker with each detail. Do you have copies of these emails? She asked David. My investigator has them. I can get them to you today. Morrison nodded. Volkov Enterprises is a front for Russian organized crime. We've been building a case against them for 3 years. But it's slow going. They're careful. Smart. If we can prove they're threatening American citizens, especially children, that gives us leverage. Can you protect my grandchildren? I asked. Yes. We can put surveillance on them. Make sure they're safe. She paused. But I need something from you in return. What I need Brandon Parker to cooperate, to testify about his dealings with Volkov. Names, amounts, how the money was transferred. Everything. He won't do that, I said. He's terrified of them. Then we offer him protection, witness protection if necessary. Morrison leaned forward. Mrs. Richardson, these people are dangerous, not just to your family, but to others. If we can use Brandon's testimony to bring them down, we save lives. I thought about Sophia and Lucas, innocent children caught in their father's mess. I'll talk to him, I said. Morrison looked surprised. You will? I want my grandchildren safe. If that means helping Brandon cut a deal with the FBI, I'll do it. David was staring at me. Emma, are you sure this could complicate your civil case? I don't care about the money anymore, I said. I care about Sophia and Lucas being safe. Morrison stood. I'll need to move fast. Can you arrange a meeting with Brandon Parker? I'll try. 2 hours later, I found myself in a coffee shop 3 blocks from the courthouse, sitting across from Brandon Parker. He'd been shocked when I called. Suspicious. But when I'd said it was about protecting Sophia and Lucas, he'd agreed to meet. Now he sat across from me looking like a man who hadn't slept in weeks. His eyes were bloodshot. His hands shook as he held his coffee cup. What do you want? He asked. His voice was hoarse. I want to show you something. I pulled out my phone, Showed him the photos Jessica had found. Sophia walking to school. A man in a black car following her. Close-ups of her face taken with a telephoto lens. Brandon's face went white. Where did you get these? My investigator. The same one who found out about your debt to Volkov Enterprises. They said they wouldn't hurt the kids. They promised, and you believed them. I kept my voice gentle, not accusatory, just stating facts. Brandon, these are dangerous people. They don't keep promises. He put his head in his hands. I know. God, I know. I didn't know what else to do. I have a solution. He looked up. What, the FBI wants your testimony against Volkov. Everything you know. Names, numbers, transactions. In exchange, they'll give you protection. They'll make sure Sophia and Lucas are safe. Brandon's expression shifted from desperate to suspicious. Why are you helping me after everything we did to you? I'm not helping you, I said. I'm helping my grandchildren. They don't deserve to suffer because of your mistakes. He was quiet for a long moment. Then, if I testify against Volkov, I'm dead. You understand that even with FBI protection, they'll find me eventually. These aren't people who forget. Maybe, or maybe the FBI takes them down and you're safe. I leaned forward. What's your alternative? Keep hiding? Keep looking over your shoulder? Wait until they decide they're tired of waiting for their money and come for your family. He closed his eyes. I never wanted this. The gambling. It started small, just entertainment. Then I'd win big and think I could win bigger. Then I'd lose and need to win it back. It spiraled so fast. I know. Victoria tried to get me to stop. For years she tried. But I couldn't, wouldn't. He looked at me. She sold your house to save me, to save our family. It was my fault, not hers. She still made the choice to do it, I said. But I understand the position she was in. If I cooperate with the FBI, Victoria goes to prison for nothing. I get protection, I get witness relocation, and she's left to face the criminal charges alone. Probably, I admitted. Unless she cooperates too. She won't. She's too proud, too ashamed. We sat in silence for a while. The coffee shop hummed with conversation around us. Normal people having normal days. I'll do it, Brandon finally said. I'll cooperate with the FBI, but on one condition. What? You drop the criminal charges against Victoria. The civil case, fine. I understand. But she doesn't go to prison. Please. I thought about Victoria, the daughter I'd raised, the woman who'd forged my signature and laughed at me when I was homeless, but also the mother who'd been trying to protect her children, the wife who'd committed fraud to save her husband from dangerous criminals. I can't promise that, I said. The DA makes those decisions, not me. But you could ask. You could tell them you want to focus on me, not her. Why should I? Because she's your daughter. And because Sophia and Lucas need at least one parent who isn't in prison or witness protection. He had a point. I'll talk to the DA, I said. I'll ask them to consider leniency for Victoria if she cooperates. But I'm not dropping the civil case. I want my villa back. Fair enough. I pulled out Agent Morrison's card. Call this number. Tell her you're ready to talk. He took the card, stared at it. This is really happening. Yes. I'm sorry, he said suddenly, for all of it. For dragging Victoria into my mess. For what we did to you. You didn't deserve any of this. No, I didn't. He stood to leave, paused. Mrs. Richardson, thank you, for thinking about the kids even after everything. After he left, I sat there for a long time, wondering if I'd just made a mistake, wondering if I was being too soft. But when I thought about Sophia and Lucas, I knew I'd made the right choice. Family was complicated. Love was complicated. The weeks leading up to the full trial were a blur of activity. Agent Morrison moved fast. Brandon agreed to full cooperation. Within days, FBI agents arrested 3 members of Volkov Enterprises. Brandon and his family were placed in protective custody, not full witness protection yet, but close. Victoria was devastated. I knew this because Sophia called me crying. Grandma Emma, they took Dad away. Mom says we might not see him for a long time. What's happening? I'd gone to see them, to explain as much as I could to a 13-year-old girl. Victoria had opened the door looking like a ghost, pale, thin, defeated. The FBI, she'd whispered when I explained. Brandon's testifying against the mob. It was the only way to keep you all safe." She'd just nodded, too numb to even cry anymore. Sophia had hugged me tight. "I'm scared, Grandma." "I know, sweetheart, but you're safe now. That's what matters." Lucas was too young to fully understand. He just knew Dad was gone and Mom was sad. Over those 6 weeks, Victoria and I had several conversations. Stiff at first. Painful. But slowly we found a way to communicate again. She'd apologized. Really apologized, not the defensive justifications from before. "I was wrong," she'd said. "About all of it. I should have come to you. Should have asked for help. Should have left Brandon when the gambling got bad. I made so many wrong choices." "Yes, you did. I don't expect you to forgive me. I need you to know I understand what I did. How badly I hurt you." I didn't forgive her. Not yet. Maybe not ever. But I listened. And when she asked if I could help with the kids while she dealt with the legal situation, I said yes. Because they were my grandchildren. And they needed stability. 3 days before the trial, David called me with urgent news. "Emma, you need to come to my office now. Jessica found something." I went immediately. In David's office, Jessica was pacing. She looked excited, triumphant. "I found something on Todd Brenner," she said. "Something big." "What?" She pulled up documents on her laptop. "Remember how I told you he was suspended for ethics violations 5 years ago?" I dug deeper. Turns out he wasn't just helping a client hide assets. He was taking a cut. David leaned forward. "Are you saying—" "I'm saying Todd Brenner has a history of financially benefiting from his client's fraud, and I found evidence he did it again with Victoria and Brandon." She showed us bank records. 2 weeks after the villa sale, a wire transfer of $25,000 went from Brandon's account to a shell company. That shell company is owned by Todd Brenner. I felt my jaw drop. He was in on it. He wasn't just in on it. He advised them how to do it. I found emails between Todd and Brandon from 8 months ago, before they even approached Victoria about the plan. Todd was the one who suggested using the power of attorney loophole. David was already on his phone. "I'm calling the Florida bar. This is grounds for disbarment. Maybe criminal charges." "There's more," Jessica said. "Todd has done this before, 3 other times, all involving elderly victims, all involving questionable power of attorney situations. He's been flying under the radar, but once we report this, the bar will investigate his other cases too." I sat down heavily. So Victoria and Brandon were being manipulated by their own lawyer. "To a degree," Jessica said carefully. "They still made the choice to go along with it, but Todd definitely pushed them toward the most illegal option. This changed things. Not in a way that made Victoria innocent. She'd still forged my signature, still stolen my home, but it added context, another layer to an already complicated situation. "We present this at trial," David said. "It shows the defendants were receiving corrupt legal advice. It doesn't absolve them, but it might convince the judge to be more lenient." "Will it help Victoria?" I asked. David hesitated. "Maybe. If she can prove she was following her lawyer's advice in good faith, if she can show remorse and cooperation, the judge might consider a lighter sentence." I thought about Sophia and Lucas, about them losing both parents to prison. The courtroom was packed. The case had attracted media attention. "Daughter steals elderly mother's home," made for good headlines. Judge Whitmore took her seat and surveyed the crowd with a stern expression. "This trial concerns serious allegations of fraud, forgery, and elder abuse," she said. "I expect professional conduct from everyone present. Mr. Chen, you may begin." David stood. He was calm, prepared. This was what he did best. "Your Honor, members of the jury, over the next few days, you're going to hear a story that's unfortunately all too common in America today. An elderly woman who worked her entire life to build security only to have that security stolen by her own daughter." He walked through the evidence. The timeline, the forged signatures, the unauthorized withdrawals. Marcus Taylor testified about the signature analysis. Jessica Walsh testified about the financial investigation. Dr. Helen Foster, my physician, testified that I was in excellent mental and physical health. "Mrs. Richardson is as sharp as anyone half her age," she said. "There's absolutely no cognitive decline." Mrs. Patterson testified that she'd seen me the day I returned from Colorado. Emma had no idea what had happened. She was completely shocked, devastated. The evidence was overwhelming. Then Todd Brenner stood to present Victoria's defense. Except he looked nervous, unprepared. He kept glancing at Jessica and David like he knew they had something on him. "Your Honor, my client Victoria Parker made a mistake," he began. "She misunderstood the scope of the power of attorney. She was acting under extreme duress. Her husband owed money to dangerous criminals. She was trying to protect her family. By stealing from her mother," Judge Whitmore's tone was dry, "by accessing what she believed were family assets in a time of crisis." David stood. "Your Honor, if I may, we have evidence that Mr. Brenner himself may have committed ethics violations in this case." The courtroom went silent. Todd's face went pale. That's a baseless accusation." "Is it dumb?" David approached the bench. "We have bank records showing Mr. Brenner received $25,000 from Mr. Parker shortly after the villa sale. We also have emails showing Mr. Brenner advised the Parkers on how to use the power of attorney illegally." Judge Whitmore's expression darkened. "Mr. Brenner, is this true?" "Your Honor, I provided legal counsel." "Did you receive payment beyond your normal legal fees?" Silence. "Mr. Brenner, answer the question." "I received a consulting fee." "For helping your clients commit fraud." Judge Whitmore's voice was ice. "Bailiff, notify the Florida Bar. Mr. Brenner, you're off this case effective immediately. Mrs. Parker, you'll need to find new representation." The courtroom erupted. Victoria was crying. Todd was arguing with the judge. Brandon, present via video link from protective custody, looked shell-shocked. Judge Whitmore banged her gavel. "Order this trial is recessed until Mrs. Parker obtains new counsel. We'll reconvene in 1 week." 1 week later, with a new public defender representing Victoria, the trial resumed. Victoria had changed. She'd lost more weight. Her eyes had dark circles, but there was something different in her expression. Not defiance, not denial. Acceptance, maybe, or exhaustion. "The prosecution calls Emma Richardson to the stand," David said. I stood on shaking legs and made my way to the witness stand. The bailiff had me place my hand on the Bible. "Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?" "I do." I sat down. The courtroom felt enormous. The jury stared at me, 12 faces, some sympathetic, some neutral, all assessing. David approached. "Mrs. Richardson, can you tell the jury about your relationship with your daughter?" I took a breath. "Victoria is my only child. I raised her alone after my husband passed away 15 years ago. I love her. I always have." "And did you ever give her permission to sell your villa?" "No, never." "Did you discuss selling your property with her at any time?" "No." David showed me the power of attorney document. "Is this your signature?" "Yes. I signed this before my gallbladder surgery 2 years ago." "What was your understanding of what this document allowed?" "It was for medical decisions. If I was unable to communicate during surgery, Victoria could make choices about my care. That's all." "Did it give her permission to sell your property?" "Absolutely not." David showed me the forged sales documents. "Is this your signature?" I studied it even though I'd seen it 100 times. "No, that's not my signature. Someone copied it, but they didn't get it right." The jury leaned forward, studying the projected images of both signatures. David walked me through the rest of it. The phone call when I'd learned about the sale. Victoria's dismissive response. The months of unauthorized withdrawals. "How did this make you feel?" David asked. "Betrayed," I said quietly. "Devastated, like I'd lost everything." No further questions. Victoria's public defender, a young woman named Maria Santos, approached for cross-examination. "Mrs. Richardson, you've testified that you love your daughter. Is that still true?" I hesitated. "Yes. Despite everything that's happened. Love is complicated. I love the daughter I raised. I'm heartbroken by the woman she became." "Mrs. Richardson, were you aware of your son-in-law's gambling problems?" "Not the extent of them, no." "Were you aware he owed money to dangerous criminals, that your grandchildren were being threatened?" "Not until recently." "If you had known, would you have helped?" I paused. That was the question, wasn't it? I would have helped them find legal solutions. I would have gone to the police. I would have helped them file bankruptcy if necessary. What I wouldn't have done is let them steal from me. "But you would have helped?" "Of course. She's my daughter. They're my grandchildren." Maria nodded. So Victoria was right to think you'd want to help your family. She was wrong to think that meant I'd accept being stolen from. Mrs. Richardson, if Victoria had come to you and explained the situation, the debt, the threats, the desperation, would you have given her money? I would have helped her find solutions, but I wouldn't have just handed over $850,000. But you would have helped? Yes. So in a sense, Victoria wasn't wrong about what you'd want. She was just wrong about the method. I saw what she was doing. Trying to paint Victoria as a desperate mother, not a calculating thief. No, I said firmly. Victoria was wrong about everything. If she'd come to me, we would have found legal, ethical solutions. Instead, she chose to lie, forge, and steal. Those were her choices. No one forced her to make them. Maria tried a few more angles, but I didn't budge. Finally, she dismissed me. As I walked back to my seat, I caught Victoria's eye. She was crying silently, tears streaming. After 3 days of testimony, the jury deliberated for 4 hours. When they returned, the forewoman, a middle-aged black woman who reminded me of my old friend Margaret from book club, stood to deliver the verdict. In the matter of fraud, how do you find? We find the defendant Victoria Parker guilty. Victoria's sob echoed through the courtroom. In the matter of forgery, guilty. In the matter of elder abuse, guilty. Brandon, watching via video, put his head in his hands. Judge Whitmore addressed Victoria. Mrs. Parker, please stand. Victoria stood shaking. Maria Santos stood beside her, one hand on her client's shoulder. Mrs. Parker, Judge Whitmore began, her voice stern but not cruel. What you did was reprehensible. You betrayed your mother's trust in the worst possible way. You forged her signature. You stole her home. You violated her in ways that go beyond the financial. Victoria was crying too hard to speak. However, Judge Whitmore continued, the court recognizes that you were under extreme duress. Your husband's gambling had put your family in danger. You were receiving corrupt legal advice from an attorney who should have known better, and you have shown genuine remorse. She paused. The court also recognizes that your husband is cooperating with federal authorities in a significant organized crime investigation. Your children have already lost their father to witness protection. Sending you to prison would leave them with no parents. Hope flickered in Victoria's eyes. Therefore, the court sentences you to 3 years supervised probation, 500 hours of community service, and mandatory psychological counseling. You will also pay full restitution to your mother, $850,000, plus damages to be paid over time as you're able. Victoria collapsed into her chair, sobbing with relief. However, Judge Whitmore's voice hardened. If you violate the terms of your probation in any way, you will serve the maximum sentence of 5 years in prison. Do you understand? Yes, Your Honor, Victoria managed to say. Thank you. Thank you so much. Judge Whitmore turned to me. Mrs. Richardson, the property transfer of your villa is hereby nullified. The property is restored to your ownership. The current occupants will be compensated for their good faith purchase, and those funds will be recovered from the defendants over time. She banged her gavel. This court is adjourned. I stood on the balcony of my villa, watching the sun set over the ocean. The same view I'd loved for 23 years. Orange and pink streaking across the sky. Waves rolling endlessly to shore. I was home. The villa was mine again. The couple who'd bought it had been understanding once they learned the full story. They'd found another property they loved even more. My belongings, which Victoria had put in storage, were all back in place. My books, my photos, my reading chair by the fireplace. Everything looked the same, but I was different. The doorbell rang. I went to answer it. Sophia and Lucas stood there, overnight bags in hand. Behind them, Victoria's car was pulling away. Grandma, Lucas ran to hug me. At 10 years old, he was still young enough for that kind of enthusiasm. Sophia was more reserved, 13 and growing into a young woman, but she smiled. Hi, Grandma Emma. Thanks for letting us stay the weekend. Always, I said, ushering them inside. You're always welcome here. Victoria and I had found a truce. Not forgiveness exactly, not yet. Maybe never fully, but an understanding. She was in therapy, dealing with the trauma of everything that had happened, working 2 jobs to start paying restitution, rebuilding her life without Brandon, who was somewhere in witness protection with a new identity. The kids saw me every other weekend, sometimes more. Victoria had agreed it was best for them to have stability, and I provided that. Sophia had told me one night over hot chocolate, I'm glad you fought back, Grandma. Mom did something wrong. She needed to face consequences. But she's still your mother, I'd reminded her. I know, and I love her. But I'm glad you didn't let her get away with it. That you stood up for yourself. That night, after Lucas had fallen asleep and Sophia was in her room texting friends, I sat on my balcony again. My phone buzzed. A text from Victoria. Victoria, thank you for taking the kids this weekend. I know I don't deserve your kindness. I stared at the message for a long time, then typed a response. Me, they're my grandchildren. I'll always be here for them. A pause. Then Victoria, I'm sorry. For all of it. I know I've said that before, but I mean it. Every day, I'm sorry. Me, I know. Victoria, do you think you'll ever forgive me? I thought about that question. Really thought about it. Me, I don't know. Maybe someday. But not today. Victoria, that's fair. I'll keep trying to be better. To earn it. Me, that's all you can do. I set the phone down and looked out at the ocean. The waves kept rolling in. Endless. Eternal. Indifferent to human drama. I'd won. I'd gotten my home back. I'd held Victoria accountable. I'd protected my grandchildren. But I'd also lost something. The easy relationship with my daughter was gone probably forever. The family dinners, the casual phone calls, the trust, all of it damaged maybe beyond repair. Was it worth it? I looked around my villa. My sanctuary. The proof that I'd built something that mattered, that I wouldn't let anyone take what was mine. Yes, I thought. It was worth it. Because standing up for yourself, setting boundaries, demanding respect, those things mattered. Even when they hurt. Especially when they hurt. I'd spent my whole life being kind, being accommodating, putting others first. And that was good. That was important. But so was knowing your worth. So was refusing to be victimized. So was teaching the next generation that love doesn't mean accepting abuse. Sophia and Lucas would grow up knowing their grandmother fought for herself. That she didn't just roll over and accept injustice because it was family. That lesson was worth the pain. The sun had fully set now. Stars were beginning to appear. I could hear Lucas laughing at something on TV inside. Sophia's music playing softly from her room. Normal sounds. Family sounds. Just different than before. I stood up, went inside, and closed the balcony door. Tomorrow I'd take the kids to the beach. Maybe get ice cream. Make new memories in this house that had seen so much. Life went on. Changed, yes. Scarred, absolutely. But still mine. And that I decided was enough.